If we can do those kinds of common sense conservative reforms in a blue state like Wisconsin, imagine what we can do in Washington. Washington, think about that. President Reagan once said something I love. He said, well, many things I love, but particularly on this. He said, we need to drain the swamp in Washington, D.C. We need to drain the swamp in Washington, D.C. Sadly, though, since he's been gone, that swamp has been filled back in. And I got to tell you, people from Washington aren't the people to fix Washington. No, instead, we need a new leader. We need someone from outside of Washington, someone who's actually gotten things done. We need a leader who is going to wreak havoc on Washington and once and for all put the people of this great country back in charge of your government. That's why I'm here, because you see, I'm that kind of leader. I'm ready to lead. And we've got ideas to lead as well. In fact, we've got an idea to take and repeal Obamacare once and for all and put patients and families back in charge of your health care decisions and your health care dollars. We call it the Day One Patient Freedom Plan. And the reason we call it that is because on day one, I'll send that plan up to Congress. And to get them to act on it, which is important, to get them to act on it on day one, I will sign an executive order that requires Congress, their families, and their staff to live under the same rules that everybody else in America lives under. You see, they need a little incentive to get that repeal passed. Because remember last year, we heard a lot in the campaigns about how if we just had Republican majorities in the Congress after the 2014 elections, they'd vote to repeal Obamacare. Well, last time I checked, it's after Labor Day. And there's no bill on the President's desk to repeal Obamacare. You see, that's why people are upset with Washington. That's why I'm upset with Washington. They need to share our sense of urgency. You see, talk is cheap. We need action. We need people who are people of action. I know what that's all about. On the first day I took office as governor, literally after I took the oath of office, I turned to our Attorney General and I gave him the letter that authorized Wisconsin to join the federal lawsuit against Obamacare. You ask people in Wisconsin, even Democrats will begrudgingly tell you. They'll tell you that the one thing that they probably can all agree on, Democrat or Republican alike, is if I tell you I'm going to do something, I do it. I don't back down. I'm not going to back down from Washington. I'm not going to back down from doing what's right for you, and I'm not going to back down from doing what's right for future generations going forward. And I'm proud of the fact that we're the only major candidate that actually has a plan to repeal Obamacare. See, between now and Wednesday, I'm going to challenge the candidates, all the other major candidates who are going to be on the stage with me at President Ronald Reagan's library. I'm going to challenge all those other major candidates to say, you know, it's great to tell people you want to repeal Obamacare, but talk's cheap. Where's your plan? Have the courage to tell people what your plan is, because you cannot repeal Obamacare unless you've got a plan to do it. We've got a plan, and our plan starts on day one, the very first day we're in office. And there's more. On day one, as your President of the United States of America, I'm going to terminate the bad deal with Iran on the very first day. You see, now there are some other candidates, including some Republicans, who have a different view of that. They think it's something you should wait on until you put a cabinet and a team in Washington. And there are others who think, well, they can just leave the deal in place and they'll just make it work. I got to tell you, I've looked at this extensively. I've looked at it with experts from around the country and across the world. This deal, the deal that President Obama has with Iran, is bad for America. It is bad for Israel. It is bad for the world. I don't need to wait to have people in Washington tell me what I can and can't do. I know it is a bad deal today, and I will terminate that on my first day in office. But there's more as well. You see, on day one, I'm going to end the unlawful executive action of President Obama when it comes to illegal immigration. See, for years, the president said some 22 times, President Obama himself said he could not do what he did last November. He said he wasn't the emperor, he was the president. He said he wasn't above the law, and then he got frustrated and did it anyway. In fact, he'd still be doing it today if it weren't for me and 24 other governors who went to court and said, you know, in America, no man or woman is above the law, including the President of the United States. Including the President of the United States. And you've actually got to pass things in the Congress to change the law. You don't just get to do it by executive action. As president, I'm going to undo those unlawful actions like that on my very first day. I'm not going to wait a week or a month or 6 months. I'm going to do it on day one. I think it's important to tell people not just about those things I mentioned, but going forward, I'm here to announce today that we've got a plan to wreak havoc on Washington, and our plan starts on day one. And so my promise, thank you. And so my promise to all of you here and everybody else across America is every week, starting next week, we're going to lay out another one of our reforms, our big, bold reforms that we're going to do starting on day one. And next week, we're going to be on Monday in Las Vegas, and we're going to tell the American people what we're going to do when it comes to taking on the big government union bosses, what we're going to do to take power out of the hands of the big government union bosses and put it firmly into the hands of the hardworking people of this country. Simple things like on day one, I'm going to stop the government from taking money out of the paychecks of federal employees for political union dues, because I don't think any worker in this country should be required to put money into a political fund that doesn't support candidates that they don't support. Why should you have to have money from your paycheck go to support somebody that you fundamentally oppose out there? That's wrong. We're going to start with that on day one, and we're going to lay out more when it comes to shifting the power from the big government union bosses to the hardworking people of this country. Those are the things we're going to lay out, and there'll be many more. Week after week after week, we want to be a campaign that's about solutions. Because you see, to wreak havoc on Washington, and those are battles I'm used to having. So you don't have to wonder if we're capable of doing it. We've had those battles in Wisconsin. We're capable of having in Washington. But to wreak havoc on Washington, it takes a leader who's got real solutions. You see, we've heard for years in Washington all sorts of political rhetoric. We need real solutions. Political rhetoric doesn't cut it. Actions speak louder than words. I actually have a plan of action to move this country forward. And my commitment to you here today is we're going to lay that out week by week between now and the elections to tell the American people exactly what we're going to do. Not to lay out a bumper sticker, not to lay out a talking point, but to literally tell you what we're going to do on all the major issues and how we're going to start doing it on each of those issues starting on day one. Because I think people are pretty cynical, and understandably so. But it's not just about anger, it's about urgency. Anger is a negative thing. It causes people to check out and give up. Instead, what I sense in America is a sense of urgency to say we need leaders to tell us what they're going to do and then have the confidence they're going to actually do that. That's what I've done as governor. That's what I did years ago as a county executive when I laid out exactly the things I was going to do in my first days of office. In fact, I laid them out in a card, and I told people to put it up on the refrigerator and hold me accountable for it. And years later, it's great, I still run into Democrats, not just Republicans and independents, but Democrats who tell me, I still have your card up on my refrigerator. Why? Because I can't believe somebody actually dared me to check and see if I do what I said I'd do during the campaign, and you did every one of those things. And for that, I'm going to vote for you going forward. I think that's what people are hungry for. They're hungry for leaders who don't just say things, but who actually say, this is what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it. So to wreak havoc on Washington, we need leaders with real solutions. We've got a plan to move this country forward. To wreak havoc on Washington, we need to have a leader in this country as president who's actually been tested. We've seen the mistake that happens when you put someone in the presidency who's never run something before, who's never been in charge of anything in government before. You can make all the promises in the world. You can say whatever sounds great, but if you can't deliver on those promises, talk is cheap. Talk is cheap. That doesn't get us moving forward. If we want to wreak havoc on Washington, we need a leader who's truly been tested. I have been tested more than anyone else in this race. Heck, I wouldn't wish it on anybody else out there as well. But we've been tested. What's the old adage? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. There were times when I wondered if that was just figurative, the way things were going out there. But we have been tested unlike anyone else in this race. We will not back down. I have passed that test time and time and time and time again. If you give me the honor of serving as your president, I am ready to lead this exceptional country filled with exceptional people going forward.